When did you realize something sick was going on in your family? My aunt and uncle had been broke for years, like choosing between groceries and electricity broke. Their kids wore hand-me-downs from Goodwill, and their car made this horrible grinding noise every time they turned a corner. But this friend of the family, Uncle George, had started coming to family events a few years back. He was my dad's old roommate from college, and everyone treated him like he was blood. The guy was loaded, owned some tech company, and he'd always bring expensive gifts for everyone's kids. At first, I thought it was just George being generous, and when I noticed that all of a sudden my aunt and uncle weren't having money problems anymore, I didn't connect it to George. He still bothered me though, because I didn't like how he'd always single out my little cousins Delia and Blaine. During family barbecues, he'd create these elaborate treasure hunts just for them. He'd take them on long walks to explore the neighborhood while the adults were busy. When they came back, the kids would be quiet and George would be super affectionate. But the moment I knew something was seriously wrong was during Christmas last year. I was 17 and staying over to help with Christmas morning. George arrived early and immediately took the kids upstairs to help wrap presents. When I went to use the bathroom an hour later, I heard weird sounds coming from the master bedroom and found the door locked. When they finally came downstairs, both kids looked upset and George was adjusting his shirt. I told my aunt what I'd heard and seen. She got this panicked look and said she'd handle it. She had a long conversation with my uncle that night, and sure enough, George stopped coming around. I felt like I'd protected them from whatever inappropriate thing was happening. But about 2 months later, everything changed. My aunt and uncle suddenly bought a house that cost 3 times what they could afford. They traded their broken car for a brand new SUV. The kids started showing up to school in designer clothes. My aunt quit her job at the diner and started talking about investing and passive income. When I asked my uncle how they could afford all this, he said George had helped them get into some business opportunities, and they were finally seeing returns. My heart sank when I realized George was back in the picture. After that, he started coming to family events again. My aunt said they'd worked out their differences and that I'd misunderstood the situation. But now George was different. He was bolder. He'd disappear with the kids for hours, taking them to his car to show them something cool, or bringing them to his apartment to see his new gaming setup. I'd try to intervene, but everyone would tell me to mind my own business, and I stopped getting invited to family events, and my parents said I was making things up because I was jealous of my aunt and uncle's new digs. When I texted Delia and Blaine to check in, they'd tell me George was picking them up from school when they were too busy. They'd send the kids to stay overnight at his place on weekends. I asked Delia if she was okay, and she just said, help me. 3 weeks ago, we had our annual family reunion at a rental hall with about 100 people. I'd been uninvited, but I came on my own and stayed in the corners, tried to be inconspicuous. George was there, and I watched him from a distance, but I lost track of him and the kids during dinner. When I couldn't find them anywhere, I started searching the building. I finally found them in a back office that was supposed to be locked. The kids were sitting on the floor, and George was standing over them with his phone out taking pictures. When he saw me, he quickly put his phone away and said they were just playing a game. But I saw the money. There was a check desk with payment services rendered written on it, and it was made out to my aunt and uncle. And that's when everything clicked. I grabbed both kids and walked straight into the main hall where my grandfather was giving his annual speech about family values. I didn't wait for him to finish. I took the microphone and told everyone exactly what I discovered. How George had been paying my aunt and uncle to give him access to their children. How the house, the cars, everything they owned was paid for by letting George hurt Delia and Blaine. The room exploded. People started screaming. My uncle tried to grab the microphone from me, and George bolted for the exit, but nobody let them leave. Someone called the police, and George was arrested. My aunt and uncle were taken in for questioning, and child services removed Delia and Blaine that same night. During the investigation, they found George had been paying my aunt and uncle $6,000 a month for what he called childcare services, plus a huge bonus payment to get back in their good graces after I exposed him the first time. They also found hundreds of photos and videos on his devices. George is serving 20 years. My aunt and uncle are both serving sentences for child endangerment and accepting payment to facilitate abuse. Delia and Blaine are living with my grandparents now and getting the help they need. I still can't believe my own family sold those kids for money, but at least now everyone knows the truth and the kids are finally safe.